And there were cheers across the land because Yacht Rock Friday had returned to UpNorthNews Radio. Good morning. Yes, indeed. I'm Pat Whitelow. There's Greg Bach. The crowd goes wild saying, who will they play? Will it be Toto? Will it be Michael McDonald? Will it be Kenny Loggins? You will just have to wait to find out on this beautiful Friday. Coming up at 6:06 when we get this show started across the Civic Media Radio Network, Keya Vakil is off, but pinch hitting at 6:30. Two of my colleagues from our sister outlet in North Carolina, where on the eve of the Republican National Convention, some Republicans are no longer even trying to hide their extremism, their contempt, their support for civil violence, if need be. So we'll talk a bit about some recent comments from a candidate for governor there. It is Friday, so we have the rest of our stable of guests that we have every week. Jim Santelle, a former U.S. attorney, talking about legal issues in the news this week. Mark Jacob with media coverage, especially since President Biden held an impromptu news conference last night. We'll talk about the coverage of that press conference. And we'll talk to Dan Schumacher as we approach baseball's All-Star break. All that and much more still ahead in 4 minutes. So if you're watching this video later on, just run this ahead 4 minutes. You'll find us at 6:06 at the start of this show here on the Civic Media Radio Network.
across Wisconsin from Civic Media. This is Up North News Radio. Now, live from our Lake Minnesota studio, here's the founding editor of Up North News, Pat Brightlow.
Well, hey there, Wisconsin. Good morning. It is 6:06 on this Friday morning, July 12th, 2024. And it's another beautiful day to have you here up north, live from Lake Wissota, from wherever you're listening across the Civic Media Radio Network, through the app, social media, or podcast. It is a beautiful day, but admittedly, a little bit of a hazy day. It appears that Canada went and caught fire again, and the wildfire smoke is again making the sunsets remarkably beautiful and deep red, but the air itself is getting a little hazy, and some folks are going to keep that air conditioner on and the windows closed all day because the air just isn't as fresh as it could be, shall we say. I got a question for you. Hot air balloons, yay or nay? Where do you come down on this? We're going to Greg Bach right away to weigh in on this very hefty matter, because I was driving out to the Twin Cities yesterday, taking one of our daughters back to the airport and ending our 3-week-long stint of traveling to see daughters and daughters traveling to see us. And as I'm coming across the bridge to Hudson and Stillwater, just this beautiful sight of these hot air balloons rising up over the St. Croix River. And I've seen that before, and it's gorgeous. But I will never, ever get into one, Greg. I will never get into a hot air balloon. It makes no sense. Good morning. And as Todd Alba likes to say, what say you?
I say when it comes, it's weird you bring it up, because I was driving this week, and when I come to the studio here in Waukesha at WAUK, I drive along like back county roads to get here. And I'm just driving, and all of a sudden I'm like, there's a hot air balloon being inflated. That's something I've never seen in my entire life. I've seen hot air balloons flying, but not the process. Oh. And I just thought to myself, yay for they, none for me. There's something about, like, I don't deny the beauty. I don't deny probably the awesome view you get. And if you like that, do your thing, Jelly Bean. But that's just one I'm like, hot pass.
I have seen one too many videos of the mishaps, and you are just helpless. You're just helpless there. And I'm not really crazy about that, but it's beautiful. And we were coming down the hill into the river valley, and so there's these trees, and this balloon is coming up like almost right in front of us, just off to the left of us, and so close and so big, coming, over the tree cover, that you thought you were in a video game. Like in Mario Brothers or something, where, this big old colorful balloon is popping up right in front of you, and then you notice a few more up and down the river, and it's a gorgeous sight. I'm glad other people do it, because I get to enjoy the beauty of it.
Yeah, exactly. I love the designs on there. They're really cool, but no. I feel helpless enough in a plane that's being flown by, seasoned experts. No.
Not to mention, 2 hours trapped in a booth with, an experienced radio show host who could take this thing crashing to the ground at any time. You already you have a leap of faith every morning, and I appreciate that. So, maybe, just maybe, somebody has a counterpoint to that and says, look, you gutless wonders, get in there. Here's the number to call to tell us that we're gutless wonders: 855-75-CIVIC, 855-75-CIVIC, or text it, or use the Civic Media app, or put a comment on Facebook or YouTube, where you can find the video version of this here radio show. And we'd love to hear from you this morning. Here's what else is coming up. Keya Vakil is off this week, our national correspondent, who's normally out in California, but I've got plenty of folks ready to step up, including two of my colleagues from our North Carolina sister outlet for Courier Newsroom, the Cardinal and Pine. Why, you ask? Well, because on the eve of the national convention in Milwaukee, there are Republicans who are no longer even trying to hide their extremism and their, frankly, contempt for a civil society. And that includes the candidate for governor in North Carolina telling a church audience how he thinks, quote, some folks need killing, and then goes on to describe basically progressives, and is all but advocating civil war. Again, the Republican candidate for governor in North Carolina. So I'll actually talk to two of my colleagues there, Billy Ball, who's one of the senior editors, and then we'll talk to Michael McElroy, We'll talk to him fresh from covering a visit by Vice President Kamala Harris to North Carolina yesterday. We'll talk about her advocacy for President Biden and, of course, the speculation that if the president were to decide to not run for re-election after all, what the vice president has to say about that, and again, how she would be received by Democratic voters, those who would greatly support her and those who instead would work to undermine her. Meanwhile, the president did hold an impromptu news conference Thursday evening to answer questions about his health and his re-election campaign, but given what can only be called the feeding frenzy of media speculation, I wouldn't even call it speculation, I would call it outright lobbying for him to leave the race, we thought maybe we would cover the coverage of the news conference, and that, of course, is what we have Mark Jacob for, and so he will be here in our next hour to talk about some of the latest happenings on the presidential campaign front, and why so much attention is being focused on that versus the human gaffe machine, the convicted felon who met yesterday with the dictatorial prime minister of an Eastern European country shortly after that dictatorial prime minister visited both Russia and China, shortly after Russia's dictator visited North Korea. It's almost like we have our own little axis of evil that stretches right to Florida, and it is a true threat to national security. We'll get into that as well. Brittany Merlot has our weekend forecast, and the Brewers were no hit yesterday. Not officially, but it certainly felt a lot like it, and it ended a winning streak that they had of a series at American Family Field. Details coming up on all of that in just a bit. A busy week next week, of course. We've got the Republican National Convention taking place, and Civic Media will have special coverage every evening at 7 p.m. You'll have Civic Media News Director Terry Bell and his team covering stories that come out of the Fiserv Forum and the surrounding area. You also have Todd Alba with his noon to 2 o'clock afternoon show from inside the convention area as well. He's actually going to be there today for his show to help preview the Republican convention. Roger writes on Facebook, hot air balloons, watch yes, ride no. So there you go. We have three no's on riding the hot air balloon. So next week we're going to have our own extended coverage of the Republican convention, including a couple of folks from the Lincoln Project. They would include longtime political strategists, Rick Wilson from the Republican side, Joe Trippi from the Democratic side. We'll talk to our friend Scott Ross, formerly of One Wisconsin Now. We'll also talk to Deborah Cronmiller from the League of Women Voters, and we will again get into the constitutional amendments that will be on the Wisconsin ballot on August 13th. And again, August 13th is normally a sleepy primary, but there are these state constitutional questions on there that make it worth your while to show up, even if it's for that alone, even if there are no other primaries on your ballot. To learn more about how you can vote on August 13th or vote absentee ahead of time, head over to myvote.wi.gov. Again, myvote.wi.gov to learn all about the August 13th primary election. We'll unpack some of the news as well here, obviously, when it comes to the Republican convention being held in Milwaukee. We already mentioned a couple of weeks back Joe Pecky's very excellent point of, if Wisconsin is such a swing state, and it is, why isn't Ron Johnson in the mix for discussion about Trump's vice presidential nominee? I mean, we saw how important it was that Paul Ryan be a pick some years back, and there certainly are other Republicans that Trump could be looking at, but he's not. But Senator Johnson will be expected to speak at the Republican convention, as will human rake stepper Eric Hovde, and we'll see what he has to say in his efforts to try to get the delegates fired up and see what exactly falls out of him in his remarks in his upcoming race against Senator Tammy Baldwin. So we don't have the exact speaking schedule here in front of us yet. We know that Ron Johnson spoke at the Republican convention in 2016 in Cleveland when he was running for a second term in the Senate. It was a speech focused on national security and attacking Russ Feingold and attacking the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Not aware that Eric Hovde has any public speaking record other than all of the talk radio shows that he's been doing, the audio snippets of which continue to be the gift that keeps on giving if you're at least in the Tammy Baldwin campaign. We also wanted to give credit to the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel and others who have been taking on some of the speculation about President Biden and, for example, the point that, it's too late to replace Joe Biden on the ballot, and that's not true. It's not true. There's a PolitiFact story all about that because, again, it comes to a misunderstanding of how the ballots are determined for presidential contests in Wisconsin. And for national political parties, their deadline to put a candidate on the Wisconsin ballot is September 3rd. The parties already have slots on the presidential ballot, but of course, they don't even have nominees yet. They haven't held the conventions. So they hold the conventions, they make a nominee, and then they have until September 3rd. So anybody telling you that it's already a done deal in terms of the Wisconsin ballot is incorrect there. Now, of course, there probably doesn't need to be any changes, and President Biden certainly proved that yesterday in his news conference. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And on the Republican side, again, unless there's some kind of great awakening by Republicans within the next couple of days, a convicted felon will be their nominee next week in Milwaukee. Sports at 6:18, Pittsburgh rookie pitcher Paul Skeens threw a no-hitter against the Brewers last night, threw 7 innings, and then he was pulled after 99 pitches. The Pirates were only ahead 1-0 at that point, but the lead did hold up as Milwaukee was unable to capitalize on Skeens being out of the game. For Skeens, this is only his 11th Major League start, but he struck out 11 yesterday, only 1 walk, 1 hit batsman. He lowered his ERA to 1.90. He was the number 1 overall pick in last year's draft out of LSU. And he has permitted 2 or fewer runs in 9 of his 11 Major League starts. Milwaukee wasted a great performance by pitcher Aaron Savali. So Freddie Peralta will get the start tonight as the Washington Nationals come to town ahead of next week's All-Star game. Wherever you're listening across Wisconsin on this Friday morning when you're here, you're up north. I'm Pat Kreitlow. We'll be right back. Well, yeah, of course we've got to do a little yacht rock on this Friday morning, July 12th, and Dr. Hook was our choice for today. Little sexy eyes. How did you put it, Greg?
If you saw Dr. Hook, you'd be wondering why isn't the song called Sexy Eye?
I see what you did there. Yeah.
When you look at Dr. Hook, this record cover too, you don't expect this music.
What do you expect?
I expect hey, I was a roadie for Lynyrd Skynyrd, and I got a dirtier version of their music.
No, it's not like that at all. But that wasn't what the record companies were looking for back then.
No way.
They're looking for it to be smooth.
Smooth.
Somehow we managed to raise the bar yet again on what this genre ought to be. Also, are we continuing our Coffee Cup Friday? Because I haven't dug out much for new coffee cups. I've got another one of the photo mugs with all the kids and the grandkids on mine.
I have my Roy Kent mug again, so I apologize. I dropped the ball. Get it?
I see that what you did there, Roy. He's got his whistle T-shirt on today again. At some point, we're going to have to move on from Roy Kent and Ted Lasso and the rest, but not yet.
You got to find their coffee cups at home. That's the thing, is we have a ton of them, and they're just like
I have a ton in the basement, and I've just got the same few in rotation. And like the whole reason we invented Coffee Cup Friday was that we would go digging through our stash and showing these things off. Or as I've now referred to things as I try to declutter the house. Touch it one more time, look at it, going, oh, this is nice, and then chuck it.
Yep.
Like I don't need 44 coffee mugs anymore. They were fun to collect along the way. Like, oh, here's one from the Black Hills, and here's one from here. I'm not going to use this ever again.
Go to the TV station you used to work at and be like, here, I got a present for you. Put these in the cafeteria.
Yeah. Well, we are, going to be finally fixing this home office back here, here in what we like to call our Lake Wissota studio, which has this kind of yellowy beigeish paint behind me, which kind of makes my face look even redder. It's got some family photos back here. And we've been talking for the longest time about painting the wall and or putting up, bookshelves or some kind of a shelving thing behind there. Maybe part of it is dedicated to just, having a whole bunch of coffee mugs back there, and we just rotate it through.
I like that.
It's a morning show, coffee mugs. Maybe that's it.
You can fill them with like sound conditioning pieces, and then it can also double as like.
Oh, I thought you were going to say like jelly beans or M&Ms or something like that, but whatever works, right? Whatever deafens the sound. At some point, somebody's saying, "I tuned in for news and I'm getting interior decorating ideas," but that's.
And now on to sports. Let's talk about.
No, people will delete their apps. No, we must not.
You baby.
Come on. There was an anniversary that was marked last week during the holiday week. It was the 1-year anniversary of Governor Tony Evers signing the state budget. All right. That's as both important and as boring as it gets for coverage of state government, okay? For a state to run, it needs a budget. How much is going to education? How much is going to the DNR? How much is going to all of these various important functions around the state? But it's also very boring to cover. And yet we're mentioning it today, a year later, for this reason. It now means that for a year, since the state budget was signed, since the state budget was passed by the Republican legislature, and signed by a Democratic governor, for a year, Republican legislators have refused to release something like $200 million in various parts of the budget, and that should have been released to address problems. They include the PFAS contamination that we've talked about before. That's $125 million right there. $50 million to help fund a brand new mandate for schools to change their reading and literacy programs. There was support for child care providers. That money's been bottled up. In total, Governor Evers noted yesterday and in his weekend radio address that more than $200 million worth of investments is sitting in Madison that could be going out the door to help people and to help communities, and Republicans are simply choosing not to. These are the same folks, the governor notes, who earned this headline: least active full-time legislature in America during the coronavirus pandemic. In other words, this is a legislature, this is a group of people who don't want to work, who are allergic to work, who you pay more than $50,000 a year to every one of them. And they feel like their job is to say no to things. Well, first to say yes, to say, oh, we care about this problem. Here, we'll pass this budget that allocates this money for it. and then do the legislative equivalent of saying psych, and then just sitting on the money as the water is still contaminated in the state. Now, of course, it's not just to sit on the money. It's to play games with the money. To, as we've mentioned before, to say, well, we'll release it if the governor caves into our demand that the companies that polluted our water, not be held as accountable. If the DNR cleans it up, then the DNR shouldn't have to go after them, which means that you, the taxpayer, have to clean it up instead of going to the company, taking them to court and saying, hey, you dumped all this, firefighting foam or all these other industrial chemicals along the way. Maybe you didn't know at the time that it was hazardous, but we know it now and you did it, so you should kick in to help clean this up. And somehow Republicans are blocking that and continuing to hold on to the ridiculous line that, innocent landowners might have to pay for the cleanup otherwise, when there's nothing in the law that indicates that that would be true. It's purely a favor to Wisconsin manufacturers and commerce and big businesses all around the state. And they should be getting far more pressure from their constituents back home for holding on to money meant to clean up drinking water in Wisconsin. That and all of these other programs that I mentioned, it's now been a year that Republicans have sat on this money and decided we don't really feel like working for you, the taxpayer. We feel like playing these political games for our business friends, and we'll continue to do so, because we can get away with it, at least until November's election, when we finally have some new maps. What else are legislators doing? Well, they're blocking what should be routine rules on things about professional licenses. I was trying to say licenses or licensing. Lawmakers are voting to block a licensing rule for eye doctors, in part because diversity is mentioned in there. In the rule that is being considered, it says optometrists must have 30 hours of approved continuing education every 2 years. It would allow, but not require, 1 hour of cultural competency or diversity training as part of that 30. Now, part of the reason you would do that is that, as mentioned by one state official, if you learn about the cultures, traditions, and ancestry of patients, it's vital to identifying patients who are at risk or suffering from genetic disorders, or identifying potential underlying causes to make treatment decisions. That is the expert and scientific reason you would do this. But simply because it mentions diversity, which is a code word to a certain type of person out there, that rule is now being blocked by Republican legislators. Hopefully the optometrists and others know the value of taking these courses just the same. All right, we'll talk to our friends at the North Carolina Cardinal and Pine about divisive and violent rhetoric next. You're Up North.
In my mind, I'm gone to Carolina. Can't you see the sunshine? Can't you just feel the moonshine? Ain't it just like your friend of...
Oh, there he is now. Hey, Michael.
Hey, Pat.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Very good, thanks. All right, so we're in our commercial break here. Folks on Facebook can still see and hear us. We're queuing up music, as you can imagine. Anyway, so we've got Billy's tape ready to go, so that'll take up the first 8 minutes, and then we'll come back for the next 7. And so we're going to get into the Kamala Harris visit, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, how'd things go?
Great.
How much did she have to say about outreach to constituencies versus did she get much into the whole controversy? Hold on a second. Greg, are you hearing me? Or are you? I think he's still trying to cue up the music. Is off this week. Oh, he's queuing up the tape. I see. Sorry. Sorry about that. And so I turned to a couple of my. There we go. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. Did she have much to say about the current controversy? Is off this week, and so
I'm so sorry. Did she have much to say about what?
About the current controversy this week about Biden.
Oh, very little direct. She alluded to the same thing that he said in his speech after the debate, which is, I know how to get back up again after getting knocked down. But it was very much, as if there were no controversy. And the response from the crowd was likewise indifferent to the controversy. They were very enthusiastic. Every time she mentioned Biden's name, the crowd cheered. It was a smaller venue, so there weren't as many people as after the Biden rally, but it was still packed. It was still capacity. It was still pretty good crowd, and they seemed very eager and enthusiastic about Biden every time she mentioned his name. They were certainly enthusiastic about her.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Sounds good. Now, we also had, I have an article here someplace, so many tabs are open, about her doing outreach to, where did it go? I'll have to find it later, to Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander community members. Did she do anything special along those lines during this visit?
No.
Okay.
It was the crowd itself was mostly Black and a lot of Black women. But the speech was pretty tailored and tight on the theme, which was the threat from Trump and Project 2025 and
Gotcha.
Things like that. So it was very much a regular campaign speech.
All right. Sounds good. All right. We're going to get going in 30 seconds with the Billy tape. I'm going to stick you back in the waiting room so you can make all the noise you want, and I'll come grab you near the end of the Billy interview.
Great. Thanks, Pat.
All right. See you in a bit.
In my mind, I'm gone to Carolina.
All right, Keya Vakil is off this week, and so I turned to a couple of my Courier Newsroom colleagues from the Cardinal and Pine. That's the name of the outlet, our sister outlet for North Carolina. And we're going to talk live in a moment with Michael McElroy, who covered an event from Vice President Kamala Harris visiting there yesterday. But first, I got to start with Billy Ball covering Mark Robinson, the Republican nominee for governor for North Carolina. He is a conspiracy theorist. He's had plenty of hateful things to say before, but to use the phrase, some folks need killing, give a listen for yourself.
It was a time when we used to meet evil on the battlefield, and guess what we did to it? We killed it. We didn't quibble about it. We didn't argue about it. We didn't fight about it. We killed it. Some folks need killing. Some liberal somewhere is going to say that sounds awful. Too bad. It's time for somebody to say it. It's not a matter of vengeance. It's not a matter of being mean or spiteful. It's a matter of necessity.
Well, so there you go. That's Mark Robinson. And with more about it is my colleague over at the Cardinal and Pine in North Carolina, Billy Ball. Billy, hello. How are you?
Happy to be here. Hope you're doing all right.
We're all doing, we all have We all have strange things going on in our respective states. Ours are mostly humorous with, professional rake stepper Eric Hovde always managing to say something weird and wrong, but at no point has he espoused violent rhetoric. This guy, Mark Robinson, this is something we don't have much up here. I don't know how outside the mainstream it is in North Carolina, but how are you all taking in these remarks?
It's outside of the modern mainstream in North Carolina. North Carolina has a history of some pretty angry, offensive, vitriolic sort of candidates, but those candidates are from a long time ago. It's worth mentioning that Mark Robinson, one of the most significant differences between him and those candidates I'm referring to, which was around the start of the 1900s, which is when you had those white supremacy campaigns. That's when you had like some of the most bitterly angry campaigning you'll see. Mark Robinson's a black man, so it changes the story, but the words that he's been saying are, in my 20 years of covering North Carolina politics, as extreme, as angry as I've ever seen, referring to LGBTQ people as filth, referring to them multiple times with the connotation that they're evil, demonic. He has, on a number of occasions, referred to abortion providers as butchers, called it genocide. He's as far right as you get, and he has made a political persona that, in my opinion, makes him maybe the most extreme governor's candidate in America.
I could certainly see where that would be true. And the other interesting thing here in his speaking as a black candidate is the way that he invokes something we're used to hearing from much more traditionally racist campaigns, and that's the whole notion of heritage. He talks about how 1776 is a distant memory. Well, things were a lot different for a black man in 1776. But more importantly, he's talking about the changes in life, and he says, quote, "We have forgotten who we are." And again, when you're so wrapped up in looking backward through a arguably distorted lens instead of looking toward the future, it sure seems to me like your only appeal is to this false nostalgia, fear, and then turn that into anger. That seems to be what Robinson's calling card is.
I think so. We really shouldn't be, honestly, that surprised for folks who are in North Carolina. Robinson's political star started to rise because of a viral video when he spoke at a Greensboro, North Carolina city council meeting about gun rights. And the video got picked up. He's an extraordinarily charismatic speaker. It's probably the greatest attribute he has. And that video got picked up. It got run by lots of conservative circles, and then he ran for lieutenant governor in the state, and it's kind of been up from there. And then, of course, the next step was the governor's race. But you're absolutely right that Robinson echoes some of the Trumpian types of things about looking back. We have lost ourselves. It all depends on who we are and what time he's talking about. And I think that it is worth saying that, of course, Robinson is a historic candidate as a black man running for governor. If he won, he would be the first black governor in North Carolina history. But at the same time, I think there was some beliefs or assumptions among Republicans that would translate to more black people voting him. Polling numbers on this show that he's not really doing any better than other Republicans. And I think it speaks to the fact that I hate that this needs to be said out loud, but Republicans tend to think that black voters are just going to fall in line because of the color of his skin. And a number of the black leaders I've talked to in North Carolina about this have said on multiple occasions that that's an extraordinarily offensive assumption.
Right, because he's basically just catering to a hateful block of the electorate, and it's the same block, no matter your skin color. Hate is hate, but it's not much better with your nominee to lead the public schools there, Michelle Morrow, Let's see, we've called public schools indoctrination centers, and calling for the assassination of prominent Democrats. So you got some angry people there, Billy.
We do. Maybe it's the heat. It's really hot.
Maybe. Well, maybe they should take climate change more seriously as well. I don't know. Let's get to some positive news out of your state. And we've talked to your colleagues previously about this. One of the more recent states to expand Medicaid with Republican support. And once that became available, I'm assuming that turnout and enrollment and everything is still at a intended pun healthy number.
Yes. At one point this spring, I know that the enrollment had exceeded 400,000 people. WRAL's reporting referred to it as a, quote, breakneck pace. It has been very fast. It's been on the ground for about a year. And I think it speaks to the fact that people in North Carolina have been waiting on Medicaid expansion for about a decade or more. This is, Medicaid expansion is an idea that came about when Obama was president. That's how long we've been talking about Medicaid expansion. And it had been delayed for a number of years, opposition in the Republican Party. But I do think that Republicans started to move because I think they were probably hearing from their constituents, especially in rural areas who were struggling to get access to affordable health care. Plus, they were seeing their rural hospitals were really struggling, trying to make ends meet. So Medicaid expansion for those hospitals in particular and those rural areas is huge because most of North Carolina is rural. It's a big deal.
And hopefully more folks in Wisconsin will take notice of this and carry it over. Billy Ball from the Cardinal and Pine, cardinalpine.com, if you want to read more about what he and his team are doing in North Carolina. Billy, appreciate your time so much. Have a great weekend.
I'm happy to have been here. Thanks so much, Pat.
And we're now joined by Michael McElroy, another one of Billy's colleagues at Cardinal Pine, cardinalpine.com. Michael, you were at the event yesterday with Vice President Kamala Harris. Thanks for being here. How are you?
I'm great, and thanks for having me. And yes, I was.
Yeah. So we obviously there's been much more attention on her thanks to the wild new rounds of speculation in national media and frankly from some Democratic circles as well. Did it? From what we have seen of the vice president, was there anything different? Was it a fairly traditional campaign rally? How much of a nod was there to the current controversy? Did you talk to people in the crowd who had somehow changed their point of view on President Biden?
It was very much a kind of standard campaign rally, and the Vice President Harris nodded to it kind of obliquely by saying simply that Joe Biden has, knows how to get up after being knocked down and is a fighter, that kind of language, but didn't address it directly. And it was even less directly than President Biden himself addressed it in his post-debate rally in Raleigh, North Carolina, whenever it was 2 weeks ago. He mentioned, I don't debate as well as I used to, but I know how to tell the truth and I know how to fight and all these things, the common theme. But I will say the thing that struck me the most is those conversations with people in the crowd. The crowd in the Biden rally was super enthusiastic about him. The crowd at the Harris rally was super enthusiastic about him. Every time she mentioned his name, the crowd cheered. And these were pretty sizable crowds. But the people I did talk to, they supported the president. But the biggest issue was even those who had concerns about his age or his debate performance, they were nowhere near as large as the concerns in the crowd over the idea of a second Trump administration. They care very much about issues in North Carolina, the crowd. And so they cared far more about threats to democracy. They cared far more about climate change policies, of which the Biden and Trump administrations would be completely different. They cared far more about healthcare, also completely different. They cared far more about reproductive rights, again, completely different among the administration. So yes, the narrative nationally about infighting among Democrats over the Biden issue, that was not in the crowd that I saw.
Now, you have done reporting on this previously, and if folks head over to cardinalpine.com, they'll find a link to a video that you did all about, what Trump and Project 2025 could mean for North Carolina. And in Greensboro, Vice President Harris, again, hit on those themes that we're talking about a big difference between the performance of one man versus what an entire party and candidate stands for, which clearly it sounds like that audience gets the distinction.
Yeah, absolutely. And two, like, there's been some Democrats who have been expressed concerns, or have outright called for Biden to step down. But the biggest Democrats in North Carolina have not been among them. Roy Cooper, a Democrat, has fully supported the president. Josh Stein, a Democrat who is the Attorney General who is running for governor against Mark Robinson, who you mentioned earlier with Billy, has fully supported the president. So Democrats in North Carolina, at least, have not been calling for Biden to step down. And the distinction between the two administrations and candidacies just couldn't be starker.
And then one thing, getting back to the vice president's visit to North Carolina, we are familiar with the outreach that she's been doing. She's made multiple trips here to Wisconsin as well. One of her more recent visits talked about, again, the uplifting of communities of color, the investments in small business, things like that. She recently was part of a kickoff for outreach to Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander communities, and that includes here in Wisconsin and elsewhere. So in talking to that, as you said, mostly black audience, or more so than Asian American there, did you see that same kind of message about the Biden administration's record for communities of color and marginalized communities?
Most certainly. And the record, even if Harris hadn't mentioned the record, a lot of the people in the crowd mentioned it to me. As Billy was talking about rural communities, North Carolina has one of the largest rural populations in the state. And of that rural population, much of it is people of color. And so a lot of the things that the Biden administration has done for these communities affects people of color in those communities. And one of the biggest is broadband. North Carolina has as many internet broadband deserts as any state in the country. And the Biden administration's funding, along with Governor Roy Cooper, have been pushing out and getting broadband a little bit at a time to these communities. So it's been a big deal.
It's all about impact, the impact of the Biden-Harris administration and the impact of Trump and Project 2025. So much to learn from our friends in North Carolina. Michael McElroy, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Pat.
Have a great weekend. And when we come back, we'll have today's history lesson and then your weekend forecast not far after that from Brittany Merlot next. You're Up North.
I'm gone to Carolina in my mind.
All right, and we are clear. Thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate it greatly.
Of course, anytime, Pat. Thank you.
That was awesome. Have a great weekend.
You too, man.
All right,
Bye-bye.
see ya. This, of course, would be the original from the Beach Boys, released this day in 1965. Though, I mean, I'm not going to diss on David Lee Roth and the Van Halen version of it. That was a fun little romp through the old Beach Boys classic back in the 1980s.
Correction, sir. That was David Lee Roth, a solo.
Oh, was that solo? Oh.
Yeah, that was after he said, you know what, I'll leave the biggest rock band in America right now. I'll be fine.
and he was for about an hour and a half.
Yeah, exactly.
And hopefully he hasn't spent all the money. So,
no.
So that was released this day in 1965. This day in 1969, the supergroup Blind Faith, which included Eric Clapton and Stevie Winwood, began their U.S. tour with a show at Madison Square Garden. Their album hadn't even been released yet, but the show was still a sellout thanks to Eric Clapton's star power. Birthdays today include Walter Egan. He is 76 years old today, and this was his biggest hit. This would be Magnet and Steel.
Now I told you so, you ought to know.
Again, Walter Egan, 76 today, native of Queens in New York City. Robin Wilson, lead singer of the Gin Blossoms, is 59. And yes, I did the math this time. It's 59, not 49. It's going to haunt me for the longest time yet. Essayist, poet, philosopher Henry David Thoreau was born this day in 1817. Which would make him 207 years old. I did the math on that. And finally, on birthdays, Richard Simmons is 76 years old today, same as Walter Egan. Richard Simmons, who, again, if I didn't have this habit of watching TMZ at the end of the day just to turn my brain off, just give me mushy celebrity news. Mm-hmm. If I didn't watch that, I wouldn't know the first thing about all the drama about Richard Simmons. But because I watch it, I know that there's still all this concern that he's like somehow been brainwashed or is in a cult or not a cult, but somehow or another he's been isolated, and he insists it's by his own accord that this once very extroverted person is now so private that people are worried about his welfare. I'm not one of them. Live, go get whatever. But the fact that it's still mentioned in some of these celebrity shows, maybe should concern me that he's okay. But
maybe you should be concerned about all people's concern.
Yeah, that's it. I just hope he gets birthday cake. He's 76 years old today.
There you go.
So good on you. Also, a birthday today. This would have been the 79th birthday for 81.
81st.
Math is hard this week. For the late Christine McVie of Fleetwood Mac.
You lifted me up.
It's just surreal to think that she's been gone now for over a year and a half since passing away in November of 2022. Somewhat related to this is that on this day in 1970, in Santa Clara County, California, a band called Fritz opened up for Janis Joplin. The lead singer in Fritz is Stevie Nicks, who is awestruck watching Janis Joplin perform. And so Stevie Nicks credits Janis Joplin for showing her how to connect with an audience from the stage. And of course, Stevie Nicks and Christine McVie would later go on and create the legend that did become Fleetwood Mac, which started as a completely different band. It was almost kind of like folk rock, light rock.
It was a blues rock band.
Blues rock.
It's part of that tradition of the late 60s of English blues bands.
Yeah. And they end up picking up, did they pick up Stevie Nicks and her boyfriend Lindsey Buckingham came along for the ride, or was it vice versa?
I believe it was Lindsey Buckingham who said, Stevie is my partner in life and in music, and if you want me, you want her. And
that worked out well for them. For the group.
Their lineup changes could be a documentary.
Not so well for Lindsey Buckingham, who was finally fired once and for all from the group a couple of years back.
My goodness.
On this day in 1969, The number one song was a bleak sci-fi song on the eve of man landing on the moon for the first time. Zager and Evans was the name of the duo, releasing in the year 2525. It would stay at number one for 6 weeks during a period when Apollo 11 landed on the moon.
Well, if we're talking about space anthems, I want more communicative, more community. I want more, positivity. We're inviting them here.
Yes.
We're inviting them here.
By all means. And then Karen Carpenter was lifted into space and never seen again. Yep.
It's terrible.
2 years later, 1971, a Coca-Cola radio commercial started running with this song.
I like to teach the world to sing. Sing with me.
The song by The New Seekers was later used in a TV commercial showing young people from around the world singing on a hillside. And then they'd later release a full version of the song, which became a huge radio hit. Again, all these young people, hippies and other aspirants from the baby boom generation coming together in peace and love. And 10 years later, they'd all vote for Ronald Reagan and things would go to hell from that point onward. But anyway, I digress.
They're all like, I'm colorblind. I'm not racist. I was in the Coke commercial.
Yeah. This day in 1979, Disco Demolition Night at Comiskey Park went horribly wrong.
Yeah.
The plan was to blow up a bunch of disco albums between games of a White Sox-Tigers doubleheader, but the explosion damaged the field. Fans rushed the grounds. The White Sox had to forfeit the second game of the doubleheader. On this day in 2004 is when we first heard of the group Sugarland with this debut single. That song, Baby Girl, went all the way to number 2 on the country charts and stayed on the charts for 46 weeks. And again, things working out all right for Sugarland ever since then. And finally, this is Medal of Honor Day. The Medal of Honor was authorized by the U.S. Congress this day in 1862, the highest military decoration. Medal of Honor Day is actually in March to reflect the 1862 date when the medals were first awarded. We'll pause here for news, and when we come back, we will have former U.S. Attorney Jim Santelle. We will have Mark Jacob, Dan Schumacher, your weekend forecast, and more on Up North News Radio, live from Lake Wissota on the Civic Media Radio Network. Ms. Merlot, good morning.
Hello.
How are we doing?
Pretty good. How about you?
Good. You feeling better?
Yeah.
Well, Rob from Tigerton is not, so we're going to talk allergies some more.
All across Wisconsin from Civic Media, this is Up North News Radio. Now, live from our Lake Lesotho studio, here's the founding editor of Up North News, Pat Brown.
Friday morning, July 12th. Good morning. Welcome back to Up North News Radio, unabashedly Wisconsin, and brought to you by Courier Newsroom, carried by our friends on the Civic Media Radio Network. It is 7:06 on this Friday coming up. Some of our regular Friday guests, former U.S. Attorney Jim Santelle. We'll talk to longtime Chicago news veteran Mark Jacob about the coverage of President Biden's news conference last night. Dan Schumacher will help us talk about sports as we head toward baseball's All-Star break. And we've got a weekend of weather to talk about with Brittany Merlot joining us as well. First, we have to ask about her allergies because Rob writes from Tigerton. Good morning from Tigerton. It's sunny and 66. Still battling allergies, and my doctor told me this year is one of the worst years for allergies. Looking forward to finishing up 2 yards today so I can finally sit back in the AC over the weekend. And he again says, I hope 3 of the best people in morning media have an excellent weekend. How great is that? Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Rob, will you just be like my life coach? Just send me messages, be like, "You're killing it, kid." Like, just, I don't know. That's just pure wonderful.
I know. Thank you for that, Rob. Brittany, you sound like you're feeling better, unlike Rob, although I know my wife, it seems like the allergies have flared up, but so has the wildfire smoke from Canada. It has definitely made itself known that, hi, Canada, we're back on fire again. Just thought you should know.
I know. Yeah, we're at moderate levels right now for the air quality index as that wildfire smoke is working itself to the surface. This is because the high pressure system, the clear skies, the calm winds, that's why we're having some of that wildfire smoke issues here in the state of Wisconsin. So that is going to continue throughout today. As soon as tomorrow, it does look to push on out of here because we do have systems moving in and temperatures are heating up. It is going to be a steamy weekend when the humidity arrives. As soon as tomorrow, you'll start to feel pretty sticky. And then on Sunday, very hot and humid, and that mugginess is going to linger into Monday as well. And our temperatures are going to be hitting into those mid 80s today. We're going to climb to the upper 80s tomorrow, but remember, it's going to feel sticky, so quite a difference from today to tomorrow. And then on Sunday into the 90s, especially into the western parts of the state. And then by Monday, the southern parts of the state are really going to be feeling those 90s. So with all of that heat and humidity, it's of course setting up the ring of fire pattern once again. So we are going to see chances of showers and storms all throughout the weekend. And right now we're in a slight risk for some strong to severe storms into northwest Wisconsin Saturday night and into Sunday. We do have a big system that looks to form. I want to say around 6 o'clock it moves in from from Minnesota and pushes into northwest Wisconsin. And then we could see some strong storms with gusty winds, large hail, and maybe a tornado or two as well.
That's tonight or tomorrow?
That will be tomorrow night.
That'd be tomorrow night. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I thought tomorrow night might be the rough one. Couple of questions for you. We talked about this last hour as well. Hot air balloons. Where are you on them? Would you ride in one?
I want to so bad. I have not yet.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Nope, not at all. The
too.
only person with a sense of danger or adventure on this morning show
This is me.
would be Brittany. Yes. So we now have an assignment. We have to get Brittany in a balloon.
I know. And Taste and Glow is right here into Wausau this weekend, so maybe they'll let me up inside one of one.
Well, sure.
Just
Why
show your
heck
media
not?
pass and be like, "I'm here." Put me
I'm
in
on.
here. Yeah.
Let's go.
I'm media. I
That
am
looks
media.
so fun.
This is National French Fry Day. We mentioned it was Henry David Thoreau's anniversary of his birth, so this is National Simplicity Day because, as he wrote once, as you simplify your life, the laws of the universe will be simpler. Except that Henry David Thoreau never had our to-do lists, which he could not handle this. It's National Etch-a-Sketch Day. It's National Pecan Pie Day. National Motorcycle Day, National Paper Bag Day. Of course, it's still Lasagna Awareness Month. But then finally, today is National Kebab Day, or kebab, if you're familiar with the Flight of the Conchords and the song The Most Beautiful Girl, which is where I turn to the two of you and ask about Flight of the Conchords, which goes back 15 years ago now, but does that ring a bell with you, that comedy troupe?
Let's get out of here. Let's get in a cab. I'll buy you a kebab. I can't believe.
I've seen them live.
Have you really?
Oh, it was amazing.
Oh,
Brittany, have you heard of them?
I don't even know what you're talking about. You lost me at Etch-a-Sketch.
Oh, okay.
Shut up.
Oh, boy.
Do you
All
enjoy
right.
comedy? Do you enjoy
Yes.
comedy?
Do you,
Love
do
it.
you
music?
laugh? Yeah.
Oh, no, yeah.
Okay.
Do you love
good.
music? Do you love comedy? Do you love men from New Zealand?
Sure.
Then I'm going to send you a bunch of Play the Concord clips.
Okay, thank you.
The show is worth it just to see the split second look on her face. Do you like men from New Zealand? Sure.
Who
Yep.
doesn't?
Mhm.
I claim that people from New Zealand are the funniest people on the planet Earth. There's a hierarchy, and they are the top. Period.
I would go, having been to New Zealand, I would go along with that. It's a gorgeous country. You definitely need a sense of humor to live that far isolated from the world, but also in such a beautiful place. So, Brittany, along with getting on a hot air balloon this weekend, I want you looking up Flight of the Conchords and watching what?
I'm on it, Pat. I'm sending her stuff.
Greg's got it. He'll hook you up with all the links, all that you need. Have a wonderful weekend with watching New Zealand comedy and flying in hot air balloons, and we'll talk to you on Monday.
Oh, it's going to be the best. Have a good one, too.
All right. You bet. 7:12 right now. And again, as always, if you'd like to reach the show, 855-75-CIVIC, 855-75-CIVIC. Call it, text it, use that Civic Media app. Or like some of folks like Robin Tigerton, put your comments on Facebook or on our YouTube page. However you go about doing it, we would love to hear from you. The Milwaukee Brewers were basically no-hit yesterday against the Pittsburgh Pirates. It wasn't an official no-hitter because the Pittsburgh pitcher, rookie Paul Skeens, who threw it, had a no-hitter through 7, and then he was pulled. He was up to 99 pitches. The score was only 1-0. And the lead held up. Milwaukee was unable to capitalize on Skeens being out of the game. If you're not familiar with the name Paul Skeens, you probably will be before much longer. He was the #1 draft pick last year. He's only made 11 major league starts, but his ERA is now below 2. He struck out 11 yesterday with 1 walk and 1 hit batter. And in 9 of his 11 starts, he's held the opposing team to 2 runs or fewer. He's got a triple-digit fastball that is simply insane. All of that to say that as the Pirates won 1-0, it wasted a terrific performance by Milwaukee pitcher Aaron Savale, who only surrendered the 1 run, and he pitched into the 7th inning. Still, the Milwaukee Brewers are your National League Central Division leaders, even though they did just lose for the 5th time in the last 7 games. And by giving up 2 out of 3 games to Pittsburgh, it broke the Brewers' streak of winning 9 home series in a row. There is 1 home series left before the All-Star break. The Washington Nationals are coming to town today, and Freddie Peralta will get the start for the Brewers. You can catch the pregame at 6:35 on Civic Media stations that include WRCE in Richland Center, WRJN in Racine Kenosha, WCQM in Park Falls, WISS in Oshkosh. First pitch is coming up at 7:10 p.m. Let's unpack some of the news at 7:15. Folks probably have heard by now that President Biden called an impromptu news conference yesterday to address some concerns about his health and the presidential campaign. And he made a couple of verbal mistakes along the way. Again, not the world's biggest surprise for somebody in their 80s, but I wonder if people caught the grasp of the issues that you were hearing from the president Instead, you had some minor mistakes while having a firm grasp of the big problems in our country. Contrast that with the incoherent babbling, getting facts wrong, a former president that has no relationships with our allies, only with our adversaries, no grasp of history or the complexities of problem solving. And the double standard that you find in the media that we'll talk about with Mark Jacob coming up in about 15 minutes or so here. As noted, by some folks on social media yesterday, take every one of those questions that was thrown at Joe Biden yesterday, now do Donald Trump, and then compare those answers side by side. And I can't say that sincerely enough. Compare the answers side by side to the exact same question. Now, if you had done that during the debate, we really wouldn't be having these other conversations. If you actually listen to the substance of the answers and, the knowledge of the problem, how those answers were expressed is another matter altogether. One was all full of bluster and division and hatred and lie after lie after lie. And the other one came from an older man who's been, an experienced and seasoned leader. So let's get Donald Trump to answer those questions. Let's get Donald Trump to answer any questions, because as has been noted here, the last time that Donald Trump had what you would call a press conference, not shouted questions in a courtroom hallway, but an actual structured news conference, was February 8th. February 8th, 5 months. Where's all the national media that's calling on Trump to answer questions? Well, they know why. Because you'd get these same incoherent, babbling, factually challenged answers. And so they give him a pass and say, well, why even bother? Because the voters should see the difference. They should see the difference in the answers that President Biden gave yesterday versus the answers that Donald Trump would give. As noted by journalist Tim O'Brien here, for example, Biden last night did not use his news conference to advise Americans to shine a flashlight up their butt or drop nuclear weapons into hurricanes. Biden didn't say he'd like to be dictator for a day or wage any kind of a war on democracy. He didn't say he'd like to date his daughter. He didn't say that he'd be happy if global warming were to continue. Biden didn't say anything yesterday about letting Russia do whatever the hell it wants with our NATO allies in Europe if he doesn't feel like they wrote a big enough check. Because for President Biden, it's not actually about the dollars and cents so much as it is about right and wrong and keeping the world secure. Instead, you had Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago yesterday. Donald Trump, a private citizen, meeting with the leader of Hungary, who is an ally of Vladimir Putin. You had Putin recently traveling to North Korea. You had Hungary's leader recently traveling to both Russia and China, and now talking to Donald Trump. It's basically, it's FDR and Churchill in Yalta and Potsdam and all those other places, completely in reverse. Those are the choices that, again, need to be put out there for the voters. We'll have more. Jim Santelle, Mark Jacob, Dan Schumacher, and more coming up next. You're Up North on the Civic Media Radio Network.
guns and money. Dad, get me out of this. Ha!
All right, while we wait to see if Jim Santelle will join us on this Friday morning at 7:20 on Up North News Radio, we'll check in on some other headlines as we unpack the news. The bipartisan Wisconsin Elections Commission on Thursday unanimously approved a set of best practices to ensure the security of unstaffed absentee ballot drop boxes now that the Wisconsin State Supreme Court ruled last week that drop boxes could be brought back for fall elections. The use of drop boxes had never been a partisan issue until Donald Trump lost and was grasping at straws, looking for any excuses. He was making up excuses before Election Day, as we later learned from the special congressional committee investigating January 6th. But because of that, enough of Trump's followers, supporters, sycophants said, yep, that must be it. It must be the drop boxes that are the problem. No, they were not. And so it took until the state Supreme Court was under progressive control, thanks to Wisconsin voters, who clearly understood that there was not a problem. There was no there when it came to drop boxes. A survey by the Associated Press and other state elections officials have revealed no causes of fraud or vandalism or theft, nothing that could have affected the results in 2020. So the best practices that were approved on Thursday by the State Elections Commission will be distributed to the state's 1,800 local officials who administer elections. They detail ways to make the drop boxes and surrounding areas safe, well lit, accessible to voters. The guidance encourages clerks to empty the drop boxes before they get full. The guidance does not specify that the boxes be emptied on any type of regular interval, but it also says recording when the drop box is emptied, who did it, and how many ballots are retrieved is encouraged. The guidance, as written up here by the Associated Press, also recommends that the drop boxes be clearly marked and that any damage be documented and inspected to ensure the box can be safely used. Clerks were also encouraged to communicate to voters the location of the drop boxes and when the last ballot retrieval date will be. The guidance for the clerks is just that. It's guidance. The best practices are not mandatory. The commission opted not to adopt an emergency rule, which carries the weight of law, and instead issued the guidance to clerks in response to questions that came in the wake of the court's ruling last week. All right, folks are going to be saying, well, wait a minute. Why not put it out as an emergency rule with the weight of law? Why just these guidelines? To which I would come back to what things were like prior to 2020. They were fine. They were good. In many cases, the drop boxes that were added in places also had security cameras somewhere to monitor them. Talking to my own local clerk here up in Chippewa County, there were all manner of best practices that clerks were already engaged in and guidance that had come from state elections officials. Because you need to keep this part in mind. There is no one election czar in Wisconsin. There's no one state election. There are, as you just heard there, 1,800 local elections, each one run by a local official, with local, meaning your friends and neighbors, staffing them, and every one of them wanting to do a good job, wanting to do their part for democracy, with virtually nothing to blemish that record in terms of any kind of fraud or abuse. These are people who take their citizenship seriously, not the honestly clown-like behavior that alleges that all of these irregularities must have happened if their guy lost. These are folks who have clearly never been a poll worker or maybe never even talked to a poll worker to understand the pride that's involved by our friends and neighbors who are administering these elections. And then all of these local results are reported, to the county level, and then the state tabulates them up, and you have an election. So to say that, Wisconsin rigged an election somehow, because there's not one central election hub that's done, it would mean you'd have to get an immense chunk of 1,800 different local officials to go in on a conspiracy to cheat somehow. That's not happening. It didn't happen. And again, you have too many people who want to do a good job by their friends and neighbors. Now, drop boxes had been used for years, but of course the popularity exploded during the COVID-19 pandemic when more than 40% of Wisconsin voters cast mail-in ballots. But of course, then, Trump started whining, and the Wisconsin Supreme Court in 2022, which was then controlled by conservatives, ruled in favor of a conservative law group that challenged the use of unstaffed drop boxes outside of clerks' offices, like near libraries and other public spaces. Excuse me. The court ruled that drop boxes could only be located at clerks' offices staffed by clerks, not at remote unstaffed locations. But you can return absentee ballots at a mailbox, and mailboxes are everywhere, and they are unstaffed, and yet we consider them to be safe because, again, the protection of the mail carries the force of law. You tamper with a mailbox, you tamper with the mail, you are going to be in some trouble. That part is known. That part is well documented. So if mailboxes are safe and are credible, then certainly drop boxes are as well. That's what the case was before 2020, and that's what's going to be the case now. Once the state Supreme Court flipped to progressive control last year, liberal groups brought a new challenge, and the court last week overturned that 2022 ruling and again allowed drop boxes to be used, starting with this August 13th election, which again is oftentimes just kind of a primary election in places like the 3rd Congressional District and in some legislative districts where you've got multiple candidates and you've got to winnow them down to figure out who is going to be the one candidate representing Democrats or Republicans on the November ballot. But there is also now this statewide issue to pass along on proposed amendments to the state constitution that would, if passed, allow the Republican-controlled legislature to basically interfere with the dispersal of federal aid to Wisconsin. Is that something that Republican legislators are likely to do? Yeah, because we're marking the 1-year anniversary this past week of the Republicans in the legislature sitting on more than $200 million for various projects that they themselves approved. They approved the state budget 1 year ago. But for a year, they've been sitting on funds for cleaning up drinking water, for literacy programs, for health care, for child care assistance, because of some political games they're playing with Governor Tony Evers. Not to mention the fact that they've consistently sat on multi-billion-dollar surpluses and not put them to work, hoping instead that they could get a Republican governor in who would then help them turn those surpluses into tax cuts geared toward the very wealthy. So their track record is clear, and they would sit on more money designed for Wisconsinites if these constitutional amendments were to pass. If you want more information on the August 13th election, head to myvote.wi.gov. Mark Jacob joins us next. You're up north.
Send lawyers, guns, and money. This shit has
Uh-oh, somebody got a haircut.
Yeah.
How you doing?
I'm doing good.
All right. Good.
Watching the crazy political stuff. But,
Yeah, no kidding.
We can't really control it, I mean, I just now tweeted, if Biden stays, okay. If he goes, okay. Let's focus on the real threat.
Yeah.
There's plenty to worry about other than that. The Democrats will figure it out at some point.
I hope so. I tell you. Yeah, trying to keep it on the substance. So
right.
Yeah, anyway. All right. So I think we're good. Otherwise, I mean, I'm probably not gonna. I shouldn't say not, but I was not gonna plan to get into some of the stuff here with our one of our hosts, Earl Ingram, interviewed the president last week, and then came out that the White House asked for a couple of edits, and Earl or his producer made the edits, and management has come out with a new, basically, code of ethics, saying, we shouldn't have done that, but we're standing by our host because he meant well and he's a good person and all of that. It'd be easy for me to get on my high horse because I think every one of us, especially when we're young, have gotten a call back from somebody going, hey, could you, or we've removed pauses or something when we're editing, video or audio. Right. And so I personally don't. I think I'm not going to say it's a mountain made out of a molehill, but it's a bigger molehill that's been made out of a molehill. But I think it kind of gets us in the weeds here in terms of discussion, unless you felt strongly about it.
Oh, no. I mean, I think it's a mistake to do that, but is it fireable? No, I don't necessarily think that.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Yeah. I think I'm good with everything else here. So, are you doing anything special for the convention next week?
Not really. I may come up and watch the protests. Who knows?
Okay.
But I mean, if they happen, they made sure that they happen far away from the convention site, right?
Well, but that's not what the protesters are planning. And I have mentioned on here a couple of times. I'm like, I'm not telling you not to do that. I'm just saying that there are instigators out there who would love to make you look bad. So right. Just don't get used, don't get played. So all right, okay, we will go in just over a minute.
Okay.
All right, our little bit of Friday Yacht Rock continues there with Firefall on this Friday morning on Up North News Radio, 734. And it's time for us to cover the coverage. There was a news conference by President Joe Biden yesterday meant to address some concerns about his health and his efforts at re-election. We've seen some of the coverage of it. Let's cover the coverage with our friend Mark Jacob, formerly of the Chicago Tribune and author of the Stop the Presses newsletter. Mark, good morning. Nice to have you here.
Nice to be here.
All right. So first off came the, I I don't want to call it an impromptu news conference, but it wasn't one that was, where we're notified 24 hours ahead of time. It was relatively short notice of a news conference. What were your overall impressions of the president, not just his performance that everybody's, been watching more closely lately, but the substance of the remarks?
Well, I think, obviously, he's not 25 or 30 or 35. He's, and so he comes across like an old man, because he is, but he comes across as an old man who knows a whole lot about foreign policy. I mean, as I was watching it, I was thinking, can you imagine having Trump on that stage and asking him all those questions? Can you imagine him trying to explain what the munitions strategy was in Europe as far as supplying Ukraine? Can you imagine that happening? I don't think so. So I thought he came across really well there. Obviously, he made a flub or two yesterday. It just seems like Pat. It seems like it's a continuing issue that people are not going to. I don't think that we moved the ball one way or another yesterday as far as whether Biden's staying or going. And, my attitude about that is, the Democrats are going to figure it out sooner or later. And, he'll stay or he'll go. Either him staying or him going is far superior to Trump winning. So I've just decided to put my emotional investment in making sure people understand that Trump is an incredible danger to our country.
Well, look, you put it very well on Twitter just this morning, where you say it's okay if people think Biden should step aside. It's okay if people think Biden should stay in the race. What's not okay is giving Trump a pass while wrangling over the issue. Focus on the real threat, Trump, while Democrats figure things out, which leads me to this point. I'm not saying the questions asked of the president yesterday were the same that were asked in the debate. But again, when it was just Biden, you could focus somewhat on the performance,
right,
but also on the substance of it.
Right.
And that's what was missing from the debate coverage. It was all about Biden's poor performance, admittedly poor performance, but so very little coverage on the substance. Trump was answering some of the same questions, but he was not answering them. He wasn't even coming close to answering them.
He wasn't. What got me in the debate thing, I went back and read it. You had this idea that, that you ask Trump a question about childcare and you get all this kind of crazy gobbledygook, and he never even mentions the words childcare. And then you get a thank you, Mr. President, from Jake Tapper. So there was that. I will have to credit the news media for asking good questions yesterday. I think that they asked specific questions. I mean, there was a good NATO focus on it because the NATO meeting just ended, and they asked him smart questions about important things, and he discussed it like he knows what he's talking about. I mean, how many times is Biden going to answer the question of, does he feel like he's, his health will allow him to stay in the job? Obviously, he does think that. So that seems like kind of a tired question, but their substance questions were substantial, and you got good answers. It was a grown-up press conference, Pat, which is, we're not getting much grown-up policy-oriented stuff in this campaign. So I felt it was kind of refreshing.
Let's talk ever so briefly about the New York Times, because I don't always want to make it all about them. But the folks on their editorial board who thought Biden should go are at least now also mentioning that Trump is unfit for office. But it almost seems like they're doing that as a little bit of CYA, as we like to call it, and it still doesn't feel like they're really coming at this race from an honest broker's standpoint of weighing the substance more than their hurt feelings that Biden won't grant them an interview.
Yeah, it is. I feel like their whole behavior, and it's been terrible. And in some ways, I hate having to bash the New York Times all the time, but boy, do they deserve bashing. And they are like the leading newspaper in the country, so it's not crazy to focus on them. I feel like that they've done a lot of things wrong. They've been really disappointing, more so than the Washington Post or almost any other news source. I think the New York Times has been an enormous disappointment. Their executives keep on coming out and saying that they don't really think that democracy is the big issue this year, which is totally wrong. And their editorials, they seem, it's like they want to throw their weight around, and they feel like they want to go after Biden and the Democrats because they think they can have influence there, and they know that no matter what they say about Trump, it's not going to change his behavior. But they still need to say those things. They still need to make it clear that Trump is a danger. And Pat, I'm not as concerned with the editorial side of the New York Times as the supposedly straight news side. And their treatment of Trump has been terrible, because they keep on kind of reporting on him as if he's kind of some sort of human interest story, that it's just kind of, well, here's the interest, here's the funny thing he said today, or they're not getting serious about him. I mean, they belatedly wrote a story about his whacked out speech on Tuesday, and they mentioned briefly, but they're talking about how happy he was about the problems in the Democratic Party, and they seem to be covering it as a feature story, not a news story. I mean, I'll harken back to when Trump was on trial. His company was on trial for fraud in New York, and the New York Times wrote a page one story about the fashion choices of the Trump family when they went to court. I mean, that's what the page one story was. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that they're into this kind of storytelling and, oh, isn't this an interesting narrative, instead of, holy crap, people, pay attention. This guy is scary as hell. That's what they should. That's what the tone of the coverage should be.
Again, the substance of what he's talking about, the substance of each issue, which takes me to the economy and the substance of that. Because again, you had tremendous numbers this week when it comes to inflation, when it comes to job growth, and when it comes to the stock markets. And I don't know what it is. This one is not just about Trump. It just seems like during Republican administrations, we're all the time hearing, when Wall Street does well, or if Wall Street doesn't do well, that Wall Street is concerned. And it just seems far too often with, Democratic presidencies, it's like it's an afterthought. And so what is demonstrably good news about the economy is so far underreported compared to the vibe of the economy. And the vibe of the economy is basically manipulated by Republicans trash talking the economy for political gain, it seems.
Right. And, in the Fox News, inflation is skyrocketing. No, actually, Pat, inflation, prices went down last month. And not only that, but wage growth has outpaced inflation for the last year, which means that even though inflation has been going up a little bit, wages have been going up faster. So, and I won't just fault the news media for this. I think the Democrats have done a terrible job of highlighting these things. And part of the reason that a lot of people think, well, boy, Trump sure had a great economy when he was president, is because he said it all the time. And I mean, see, over and over and over, and said it again. But and Democrats, I feel like they don't talk about that enough. They don't, they're not braggarts about it. And you almost have to be, and you're going to, in this, the convention that's coming up, you're going to hear a lot of lies. Like, you're going to hear, oh, there's a struggling economy and skyrocketing inflation and skyrocketing crime and all that. They're all lies. That's it. I mean, the stats are good. This has been a good presidency. No matter whether you want Joe Biden to stay or go, he's overperformed. I mean, it's been a pretty impressive presidency.
I really can't say enough in agreement with you on what you said a moment ago about Democrats and the Biden campaign and the Biden White House also not doing enough to talk up their economic and business record. My question put it all on the media, but I think far too many progressives, they think, well, we're supposed to be, either anti-business or hostile to business, so we can't be seen praising Wall Street numbers when, it's actually supposed to be a little bit of both. You actually want businesses to succeed. You want capitalism to succeed, but it seems like, Democrats are the ones who are guarding against the excesses of capitalism, the abuse of consumers, the abuse of employers, the abuse of the environment. That doesn't mean you can't root for good economic news when you honestly have a good economic recovery, and Democrats, progressives, media types would do well to learn those lessons.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. A lot of people have 401ks that are tied to the stock market. It's not like the stock market is irrelevant. I mean, it's not a perfect indicator of how people are doing, and it's really important for Democrats and progressives to remember the poor people and to remember that we really need to do something to bring everyone up. So that needs to be stated. But everyone should be rooting for the economy overall to do well. I think it's a good thing if people get rich. I mean, I'm for it. But as long as everyone gets taken care of in one way or another. And so I think the messaging has been not aggressive and not as focused as it should be. If they just listen to what you just said, I think they'd be much better off.
Thank you. Let me again just read one of your tweets verbatim here, and then have you pick up on it because it deals with your latest Media Misses video with Stephen Beschloss. And it says it so clearly. If you, talking to the media, dear media, if you're reporting on Trump's VP pick, which could come as early as today, if you're reporting on Trump's VP pick and you're not emphasizing that Trump incited a mob that wanted to hang the last guy in that job, you're really missing the point. And I couldn't agree more that any coverage of Trump's VP pick that does not talk about Mike Pence not supporting him and everything else it's journalistic malpractice. It just is.
Yeah, it is. And the media just loves the horse race, and they love the competition and the suspense. And so they gravitate toward, what are the strong points? What are the weak points? Who's in the driver's seat here? Stuff like that. It's just kind of horse race stuff. But the context is super important here. The guy who ran with him for vice president last time and who was vice president won't have anything to do with him because he incited a mob to chant "Hang Mike Pence" and bring a gallows outside the Capitol. I mean, that's a context that it's not just, oh, by the way, that just looms over the whole story. And Pat, I wanted to say one more thing about that. Not only will Pence have nothing to do with Trump, Trump's wife will have hardly anything to do with him. And that would be if this was by the Bidens and Joe Biden wouldn't go out and campaign with Biden, they'd be writing it all over the place. But it's just baked in, so the media is bored with it. The fact that she won't have anything to do with him in public.
It's interesting. I'm glad you said that because there have been not rumor stories, but kind of that is Jill Biden being too protective of Joe Biden. Look, again, if you're going to write that story and you haven't said a thing about Melania Trump not showing up at court, or at campaign rallies or anything else, again, you're making an incredible mistake. Last point I want to make, and you repost this from our friend Jennifer Schulze about, again, what they're going to say at the convention next week versus what Republicans would actually do. So when Republicans say, well, we're actually backing away from a national abortion ban, it's only because they have found a backdoor way into these things that journalists are going to have to do a better job reporting.
Right. This idea, it just blows my mind that someone's going to try to depict Trump as a moderate on abortion. I mean, if you're in the media and you're reporting that story, you're being taken for a fool. And I mean, are you referring to the Comstock Act stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, people
and
don't
then fetal
understand
personhood
that.
as well.
Right. Those are two different ways you could ban abortion, virtually ban it, or ban it completely nationwide without ever passing, I mean, the Comstock Act thing is on the books, so you don't even have to pass anything in Congress. You just need to enforce an antiquated law that nobody's enforced for a very long time. And so the Republicans are running a scam here. This idea that they, we were moderating, we're softening, and that's the word they used in the headlines. We're softening on abortion. And the media went for it. The New York Times, Washington Post both had "soften" in their headline. And that's not what's happening here. They're just trying to make it more palatable to people so they can fool them.
Yeah, the Project 2025 stuff is real, and it's a map, and nobody's saying that every one of those things are going to happen, but there's something in there that could impact your life that you should be looking into. Mark Jacob, as always, thank you. Get his Stop the Press's newsletter. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week.
Talk to you later.
All right, Dan Schumacher's coming up next. You're Up North.
That I've always dreamed of, I knew it from the start. I saw your face and that's the last I've seen of my heart.
Well, look at what the cat dragged in.
Yeah. It'll be a hot one today.
It sure is.
It was nice on the water yesterday. I spent a lot of time on the water yesterday.
I was going to say on the water, or how long did you stay at the Mallard?
Probably an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came back home because long story, came back home to take care of something for work.
Good.
It came up. But then I did run up to Jake's and have dinner and then went out for a little ride in the evening. So it was nice.
Yeah. Well, good. Got to get ahead of that stuff before the heat gets here. So, all right. Okay. Sounds good. We'll get going in a few seconds here.
On the day when I was born, Daddy sat down.
All right, Dan Schumacher's here, and fellow Deadhead Greg Bach as well. What do we got this morning for our little musical welcome?
Little Mississippi half step Hootaloo.
There it is.
Hootaloo?
Yeah.
That's just the lyric. That's Mississippi half step.
I was not aware there was going to be a spelling bee as part of this, but okay.
Yes is there.
All right. Brewers start a 3-game series against the Washington Nationals heading into the All-Star break. Pre-game at 6:35 on Civic Media Stations in Richland Center, Racine, Kenosha, Park Falls, and Oshkosh. First pitch 7:10. Dan, I know you were on the water yesterday, and why wouldn't you be? It was a gorgeous day to be on Lake Wissota, to be on the Chippewa River. Some of us who were doing a little bit of work, and we had the Brewers on. They were on yesterday afternoon, and we'd look over, and we'd look over, and we'd look over, and we're like, we are getting no hit. We are getting no hit. Not the biggest surprise, because this kid, Paul Skeens, I mean, he's for real. I mean, he no-hit the Brewers through 7, and then they pulled him. The score was 1-0 at that point. And if this were a Craig Counsell thing, we would dissect this 8 ways to Sunday. But in this case, the Pittsburgh manager said, you're all good. And I didn't hear anybody grousing afterwards. So we can all second guess it. But to me, the larger story is this guy is that good, and the Brewer bats had no answer for it.
Yeah, it was a pretty cool game to watch, actually.
Mm-hmm.
The way he reminded me a little bit of Greg Maddux, who could just place the ball anywhere he wanted. Place the ball. He doesn't throw the hardest. He doesn't throw the 98-mile-an-hour fastball, but he places his pitches in the right spots. So that was an impressive debut outing for him. But the Cubs swept the Orioles. So
that's great. Moving on. So we're just.
Well, to me, the better story of today, as I was doing some training camp, is 2 weeks away.
Oh,
Football season is 2 weeks away.
Yeah,
my goodness.
That, and somebody had up a social media post that the first games of the season for the college teams are like 50 days and counting until the first. So it's out there. So yeah, one moment we're talking about it being in the 90s today, and the other we're like, hey, football season's going to be here.
Oh, right, exactly.
So we've always got. It could be that some folks don't want to talk about where their team is in the standings right now, but I understand if you look if my breaking news, the Cubs are not in last place currently. They're tied for last place with the Cincinnati Reds.
Things are looking up.
Things are definitely looking up at the Pirates and the Cardinals and the Brewers as well. What do the Cubs have for All-Stars this year? Anything?
You know what? I don't know. Actually, I don't know. I don't even know how many they even have.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. You'd have to look that one up, Pat. I wasn't paying attention to that, getting ready for All-Star break.
Dan, here's the thing about that question is Pat asked it with tone. You answered it with earnest, and he was like, uh-huh.
No, I'm not going to blame him for not knowing. Right. I'm actually trying to look it up very quickly myself here, and I have to keep scrolling to see if there's something there. Because look, last year the Brewers had nobody. Corbin Burns was there, but he never got put into the game. He was in the bullpen the whole time here. So you're gonna have years like that. Whereas we've got a couple of players in this year.
Game? When is the All-Star game?
Tuesday in Arlington, Texas.
I was going to say, isn't it usually around the 4th of July?
No, it's always a couple, like 2 weeks after the 4th of July or 10 days or so. So the Cubs have all of one player in the All-Star game here. Left-handed pitcher Shota Imanaga.
Oh, that guy, yeah.
That guy. He has made it says here on MLB.com, he has made an effortless transition from Japanese professional baseball, owning a .84 ERA through his first 9 starts. It has risen to 3.16, but he has been one of the National League's most effective starters and has become an anchor of the Cubs rotation. So you got that going for you, which is nice.
Yeah. Plus he can hit the ball. Man, he can hit the ball. I seen him hit a home run the other day. It was unbelievable. So,
really?
Yeah, he's an all-around ball player. So pretty good player. Pretty good player. A lot of money though. A lot of money for him.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Do you watch the home run derby as part of the All-Star game as well? Or, I mean, for me, it's kind of lost a little of its luster, but I'm not going to say don't do it. I don't watch it as intently as say when Prince Fielder was knocking them out all the time.
I would say the last time I watched the home run derby, it was when McGuire and Sosa were doing it.
Oh, well, now we're really kicking it old school here.
Yeah, that's a long time ago, but it was always fun because there was a great season that year at the same time because they were both battling for the home run record. So when they put them both in that home run derby, it generated a lot of excitement at the All-Star games.
So. Hey, it was like 99.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably was. That's how old I am.
Oh my goodness.
But I haven't watched the home run derby in a long time.
Yeah. It's one of those where if I'm home and I've got, the TV there, but it's not necessarily, shall we say appointment viewing,
Right.
But no, as we talk about getting into kind of the preparations for football season, we had Riley Kleist on the show a few weeks back. He's one of the assistant coaches at UW Stout, talking about what summertime is like when you're getting, ready to prepare for football season. You've got recruits visiting, you've got freshmen who are coming in. There really is no end to the preparation. And in your case, up at Northland College, you're looking at the potential to get a football team going. Yep. So again, we're talking year-round activity for a sport like that.
It is. And almost every sport is like that, Pat, now. I mean, it doesn't stop. And, like yesterday, I know my coach was excited to gain a transfer for volleyball. So recruiting is going on all summer long for all sports. You got my hockey coaches that are on the road for watching AAU tournaments, softball AAU tournaments all over the country. So it really doesn't stop. All the coaches, no matter what sport you are, basketball coaches are putting on summer camps and what they call prospect camps and inviting high school kids to play in pickup games and stuff like that for evaluation. So recruiting just doesn't go by a short off season. It's a full year round job. It never stops.
Which would explain why a man in your position, when you get the chance to get on the river, will get on the river. And I sense you'll be back there again today, given that there's chances of thunderstorms for Saturday and Sunday.
Yes, I did see that. I thought that, it's kind of like bait and switch. I swear to God, all week long it says it's going to be beautiful all day. Every day there's going to be an unbelievable weekend, and all of a sudden now they're switching the tunes.
Don't dump on the weather, people. Stick to the question. You will be on the water today.
It's the only job in America. It's the only job in America that you can be consistently wrong and still keep your job.
Okay, we're going to have a cage match with Brittany Merlot coming up one of these mornings at 7:07. Yeah. Mr. Schumacher, thank you. I probably will see you on the water.
You probably will.
All right, and you'll see Greg Bach with Matt and Air on Air at 10 o'clock. Thanks, Greg. Have a great weekend. Thanks to all of you for being part of the festivities as well. Follow what we do at UpNorthNewsWI.com. I'm Pat Kreitlow. Have a great weekend.